Welcome back, everybody. Today's deep dive is going to be about leadership. Well, not the usual, like, pump-up kind of stuff.
Right.
More like, should companies even be allowed to, like, make someone a team leader without training and scenario testing first?
Yeah.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting thought, actually. Especially when you start to think about, like, the potential impact of that.
For sure. Because, like, we're not just talking about, like, bad vibes here, right?
Sure.
Bad bosses, toxic leaders, all that. Like, that can cost a company a ton of money.
Oh, yeah. It's a crazy amount of money. It's something like $1 trillion every year that U.S. companies lose from people quitting.
$1 trillion.
$1 trillion.
Yeah.
And, a lot of that comes down to people having a bad manager and just being like, I'm out. Have you ever had a boss who made you want to quit?
Ugh, yeah. I think, like, most people have probably had that experience at some point, Like, whether it's a micromanager or someone who takes credit for your work or just make the whole place miserable. It's no surprise people end up updating their resumes, right?
Yeah, for sure. But the thing is, it's not just about losing good employees, right? It's also the productivity just goes down. Teams lose all their momentum. The company's reputation can take a real hit.
Yeah.
It's like a domino effect with some pretty serious consequences.
So, okay, bad leadership is really bad for business. That's pretty clear. But how are all these toxic bosses even getting through in the first place? Isn't the hiring process supposed to, weed them out?
Well, that's the thing. The way we hire people now, a lot of times it misses the mark. Like, it's good at finding people with the right technical skills.
Yeah.
But leadership, that's a whole different ball game. You can have someone who looks perfect on paper, all the right qualifications, but then you put them in charge and they totally fall apart.
Yeah. Like, they can talk the talk but not walk the walk.
Exactly. Like, you really need to see how someone's going to react when things get tough.
Right.
How do they make decisions? How do they treat the people on their team? And that's where this idea of scenario testing comes in.
Okay, so, like, I'm picturing, like, a flight simulator, but for leadership.
Haha. Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so, like, imagine you put a candidate in a really realistic scenario. Like, maybe they have to deal with a conflict between people on their team. Or, they have to figure out this tricky ethical situation.
Yeah.
And by seeing how they act, you can actually see their leadership style, not just what they say they would do.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Seeing how they actually behave has got to be way more useful than just listening to what they say in an interview, right? But, I mean, wouldn't making all these different scenarios take forever? And wouldn't it be super expensive?
It is definitely an investment. But, I mean, think about how much it costs to hire the wrong person. Remember that $1 trillion we were talking about? Suddenly, spending some money to find better leaders seems like a pretty good idea, don't you think?
Yeah, I guess so. It's like insurance for your company culture, right?
Exactly. You're not just trying to avoid something bad. You're actually trying to make something good happen.
Right. So this scenario testing, it doesn't just help you get rid of the bad candidates.
Yeah.
It also gives the good ones a chance to practice and get better, even before they're managing people.
Exactly.
That's really cool. But these scenarios, they have to be realistic, right?
No, absolutely.
You can't just, like, make up some random situation that would never happen.
No, they have to be like the kinds of problems that leaders face every day, like how to work with difficult people, how to make decisions when you don't have all the information, those kinds of things. And they have to be updated all the time, too. Because what was a tough decision 5 years ago might be totally different now.
Right, because the way we work is always changing. So I guess going into one of these scenarios must be kind of nerve-wracking, right?
Oh, yeah. It can be a bit like stepping into the unknown, for sure. I mean, think about it. Leadership roles, they always come with pressure, right?
Right.
Stakes are high. So if someone freaks out in a fake scenario, it might be a sign that they're not ready for the real deal.
Okay, yeah, like a trial by fire, but, in a safe space.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that pressure make people just try to give the right answers?
Yeah.
Like, how do you get them to be themselves?
That's where it comes down to, like, how the scenario is designed and how good the facilitator is. It's not about, right or wrong answers. It's about seeing how they think, how they solve problems, how they work with other people.
So more about the process, not just the outcome.
Exactly. A good facilitator, they'll push them a little bit. challenge what they're thinking,
Hmm.
and make it a place where you can really see those leadership qualities or, maybe see that they're missing.
Right.
Plus, even if they don't, like, ace the scenario, the feedback they get can still be really helpful. So
Yeah.
it's a learning experience either way.
So even what might feel like a failure is still valuable.
Yeah, totally. It's all about growing and developing, right? And for the people who do really well, it's a huge confidence boost. They go into their leadership roles feeling like they can handle anything.
I like that. It's like raising the bar for everybody,
Mm.
not just getting rid of the bad ones, but also helping the good ones be even better. We've been talking a lot about what happens when leadership goes wrong, but what about when it goes right? Like, what does really great leadership look like in action, and how does that help a company succeed?
That's a great question. When you've got really good leaders, it changes the whole organization. People are more engaged, they're more productive, they come up with more new ideas,
Yeah.
communication gets better, teams work better together, and everybody just feels better about being there.
Sounds like a total culture shift.
Yeah, it really can be. And all of that leads to better results for the company.
Hmm.
Companies with strong leadership, they tend to do better than their competitors. Their customers are happier. They're just more successful overall.
Okay, so it's clear that good leadership pays off. But how do you convince companies to actually invest in it? I mean, some people might still be hung up on the cost.
Yeah. Well, it's about changing how we think about it. Instead of just focusing on how much it costs up front, we need to look at what we get back from it. Think about it. If you invest in training and scenario testing, you're way less likely to hire a toxic leader, right?
Yeah.
And we already talked about how much damage that can do.
Right. Lost productivity, people quitting, maybe even lawsuits.
Exactly. So you're actually saving the company money in the long run by preventing those disasters.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you're making the workplace better, which means people are more creative and ultimately the company makes more money.
So it's a win-win for everybody,
Yeah.
employees, customers, and the company itself. But even if a company's not ready to, like, completely change how they hire, are there smaller things they can do to start developing better leaders?
Oh, yeah, for sure. They can start by figuring out, like, what are their core values? What kind of leadership do they want to see? And then they can build training programs around those things, give people the tools they need to be effective leaders.
Like what kind of tools?
Things like communication skills, how to handle conflict, how to give and receive feedback, how to build a strong team. These are all essential leadership skills, and they can be learned.
Okay.
You can even use simulations and role-playing in these programs, create those safe spaces where it's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So there are options for companies of all sizes and budgets. But let's say a company is ready to go all in on scenario testing. Where do they even begin?
The first thing is figuring out what good leadership means for them. What are the specific skills and behaviors that will make them successful?
So it's not like a one-size-fits-all thing.
No way. A tech startup might want leaders who are really innovative and adaptable, right?
Hmm.
But a hospital might want leaders who are more empathetic and good at communicating.
Yeah, makes sense.
So the scenarios need to be tailored to each company's specific needs and values.
Okay, so once you've got the scenarios, who actually runs them? Do you need to hire like a leadership guru or something?
Not necessarily. There are companies that specialize in this kind of thing. They'll work with you to create custom scenarios and provide trained facilitators.
Oh, so it's like outsourcing your leadership evaluation.
Yeah, kind of. It can be a good way to get started without having to build everything from scratch.
Right. Okay, so you've got your custom scenarios, you've got your facilitators, but how do you know if it's actually working? Like, how do you measure success?
That's where you need data. You got to track things like how well are the people who did well in the scenarios actually doing in their jobs? Are they keeping their teams happy? Are other people saying good things about them?
So it's not just about how they do in the test, but about what they do in the real world.
Exactly. It's about proving that this approach actually works.
Okay, so we've talked about the cost of bad leadership, how our current ways of hiring aren't working, and how scenario testing can help us find good leaders and get rid of the bad ones. We also talked about how to actually put these ideas into practice and how to measure if they're working. Before we finish this part of our deep dive, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about updating these scenarios. Why is that so important?
Well, the way we work is always changing, right? New technologies, globalization, different generations coming into the workforce. All of that affects what it takes to be a good leader.
Yeah.
What worked 10 years ago might not work at all today.
So what worked in the past might not be enough anymore.
Exactly. Leaders need to be able to adapt to all these changes. And to do that, they need training that keeps up with the times. That's why it's so important to keep those scenarios fresh and relevant.
That probably means focusing more on things like emotional intelligence, communication, and building strong relationships, right? Not just technical skills.
Absolutely. Leadership today is less about being the boss and more about working together, understanding other people, and creating an environment where people feel trusted.
Okay. And that brings us back to what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
How do we create better leaders?
Yeah.
How do we move away from this idea that you either sink or swim and instead be more proactive and supportive?
Well, it requires a big change in our thinking. We need to stop thinking that leadership is something you're born with and start thinking of it as a skill.
Uh-huh.
Like any skill, you can learn it, get better at it, and master it through experience and training.
And that learning shouldn't wait until someone's already a manager, right?
Right.
We need to start earlier, give people training and opportunities to grow even before they're in charge of anyone.
Exactly. It's about creating a pipeline of future leaders who have the skills and the mindset to succeed in this crazy, ever-changing world.
And scenario testing can be a really powerful tool for that. It's not just about getting rid of the bad leaders, but about helping the good ones reach their full potential.
Exactly. It's about investing in the future of leadership and making the workplace better for everyone.
Well said. But before we wrap up, I'd love to get your personal take on this. Like, from your own experience, what made the truly great leaders stand out?
That's a good question. When I think about the best leaders I've known, it wasn't always about their fancy resumes or their technical skills. It was more about how they treated people.
Yeah.
They genuinely cared about their teams, they built trust, they created a safe environment where people could be themselves, they inspired people to do their best.
So it's about having both the brains and the heart, not just one or the other.
Exactly. And those qualities, they're hard to measure on a regular test, but you can definitely see them in a well-designed scenario. Like, how does someone react when a teammate messes up? Do they offer help or do they just criticize?
Yeah.
How do they handle disagreements? Do they try to understand different points of view or do they just push their own ideas?
It's about those little things, those interactions that really matter.
That's it.
Right.
And that's why I think this whole approach to leadership development is so powerful. It's not about checking boxes. It's about finding and nurturing those human qualities that make great leaders.
That's a great point, and I
Yeah.
think it's the perfect note to end on. So, listeners, as you think about your own experiences with leadership, ask yourself, what made the best leaders you've worked with so amazing? And could those qualities have been spotted or even developed through this kind of scenario-based approach? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into leadership development. We'll see you next time.